Well, well, well.
3 holes in the ground.
There we go. I knew you were going to say that. How you doing, Sean? What's going on?
I'm fantastic.
Yeah?
Yeah, great.
Good. It's good to hear. It's
Mhm.
Saturday kind of afternoon-ish right now.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever really done a cast at like this kind of hour.
That's actually a good point. Now that I think about it, to hearken to our guest today, it's not late, it's early. So just to be clear.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It's not
Sure,
quite
I'm sure
4:30.
I'm sure he overhears that, but not anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We started talking just before we went live, and I would like to clarify what you were saying about the Okanagan Valley in which I live in,
Yes.
which I just moved to, by the way. I used to live in
Right.
downtown Vancouver, for
Downtown
those that
Vancouver,
don't know,
right.
and
Yeah.
now I live in the Okanagan. Can you
Yes.
tell us a bit about the Okanagan Valley? What's going on here?
Yeah, so it's that area of the world that you live in now is what is the sediment bed, or what was the sediment bed of a massive prehistoric lake. And it was as big as it went down into Washington, even, which is why Washington's soil is the similar sort of fertileness that you enjoy there in the Okanagan Valley, and which they enjoy around Delta, BC, which I know that's Abbotsford. It's very fertile soil. And
okay.
it's called the Lacustrine Plain, and what it is it sat at the bottom of a lake for millions of years.
Yeah.
And so now that lake is gone, thankfully for you guys' sake,
I think I would live somewhere else if the lake was here. I wouldn't just choose here if there was a lake. But keep going. Yeah.
So it's super fertile because of that. It's a sediment bed of a prehistoric lake. So that's why the soil's so good around your area, Chilliwack, and around like specifically Abbotsford, Delta. Maybe not so much around Vancouver, but yeah.
Wow.
And then and the reason behind that is because of the isostatic balance of the West Coast, which is what it's the Mohovicic layer of discontinuity pushes up rock formations. It's like when you're sitting in canoe with a big guy. If you were a little guy and the big guy got into the canoe, you would raise up. That's isostatic balance. And the Mohovicic layer of discontinuity governs that on our planet. And the Mohovicic layer of discontinuity is pretty far beneath the Earth. And so basically that's why mountains raise on the coast of most continents, is because of isostatic balance. Yeah.
All my sarcasm backfired. That's actually interesting.
Yeah. I just had like a Will Ferrell moment where I went, oh.
Yeah. People came here for drums and walked away with geographical.
So huge thank you to Clifford Ramcharan, my geography teacher in high school. That's like the most interesting thing I obtained from him for his talks.
Yeah. Well, now I understand my area so much better. I'm going to be certainly a lot more cognizant on the soil situation that's in.
And then you can like walk around and try and high five people and like say, "Hey, Lacustrine Plainer, just like me," right? Like,
should I get a shirt made?
Maybe you should.
I should have a hat or a shirt. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty wise. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say we live right on the brink of like the city, and like there's orchards right here.
Yeah.
And because we've only been here a month, I don't know what they're growing over there. Like I just see vines and I see trees, and we're kind of excited to be like, oh, what is it? Is it pears? Is it apples? Is it cherries? Is it oranges? We're so excited about sneaking there at 3 a.m. and not getting shot with a shotgun while we steal
rock
a bunch
salt.
of stuff.
They'll shoot you with rock salt.
Is that the deal? Yeah, probably is.
Apparently, that's what they used to do in the '60s around Vancouver's and Kelowna's. They would shoot the quote unquote hippies with rock salt when they were trying to grab the mushrooms.
Okay, well, that's where we're at. I'm getting used to the Kelowna area for that reason. Hey, everybody, welcome to the stream. We're my name is PJ. This is Sean. We've been doing Drum Geek for a while now. and chatting with some awesome drummers in a, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, like kind of a relaxed, hey, we're hanging out, we're getting to know drummers.
Yeah.
But you started, I say you, but we started this concept recently where we do a bit of a deep dive on
Mm-hmm.
a specific album. Sean,
Yeah.
give us a bit of a rundown on that.
Yeah. So I was listening to my vinyl. This was a while ago. This is when I mentioned it to you a
Yeah.
couple months ago. And I just was really kind of bummed that you don't have, I know there's Wikipedia and I know there's, but you can't sit with an album and, or even a CD liner or a cassette liner and like read through the notes. And, it just, to me, it was like there's so much that goes into an album that we the listeners don't know, but then we the artists do see, like, the 3 years that it's taken to create craft this product.
Yeah.
And that the liner notes, as I said before, is this really small bit of homage paying respect to the people that really don't get a lot of the credit. And so to me, liner notes are super important, or at least to me, they did serve a purpose. In fact, there is, on this album, we're going to talk about someone who's been credited with writing the liner notes. So
That is correct.
that's pretty cool. And so that just sort of made me feel like, that would be a really good show if we put on this show that we delved into the liner notes of that album.
Yeah.
And because also too, as I mentioned before, when you talk to drummers, or if you have a show like we have, where maybe you do double up on, we've talked to a few drummers a couple of times, I find it can be very difficult to try and do another show, even 2 years later, that you didn't do the 2 years previous, that you're not asking the same questions. And I thought, what a great way to give the drummer the floor to say, let's talk about something that you were a part of that's not necessarily just drummy, but that also is accessible to people that maybe aren't, drummers, but they could relate to, in this case, Aaron, and in last week's episode, Mitch, where they're fans of the band. And although maybe they're not drummers, but they can still partake in our conversation, because it's like, yeah, that album was awesome. That was, that changed my life. So
There's a lot that you can walk away with from stories from people that have done
yeah,
recording in general, but
absolutely.
albums that we can kind of reference and that maybe we've heard throughout our lifetime. But hearing stories of the politics of being in the studio, or the pre-production, or the follow-up, or just the interpersonal stuff is very valuable to anybody that's going through these processes. So
Absolutely.
today in particular, we're talking to not just because we're talking to him, but he's actually probably one of my top 10 favorite drummers of all. Like
Mine
Planet
as
Earth.
well.
I don't know if you know about this Planet Earth.
Yeah.
Planet Earth.
I've heard of it.
True, yeah. But secondary to that, I was super stoked when you said that we were going to be chatting with them, because Pocket Full of Kryptonite is kind of, I would say, one of my top maybe 3 most influential albums that ever hit me, ever.
Yeah.
And as a drummer, it was obviously due to a lot of the syncopations, a lot of the groove, the production of the drums that happened on that album. And I'm super stoked to learn a little bit more about that album today.
Yeah. Well, it just, to me, like the Pocket Full of Kryptonite album, I mean, it definitely, the moment I heard, and I believe I heard What Time Is It was the first track, or maybe even Pocket was the first track I'd heard.
Yeah.
And you definitely knew, because this was also around the era of when Living Color came out with an album as well. It's sort of a similar vein. And it was just like, you just definitely knew there was a kind of a new genre that was starting to be, in the ethos of popular culture, and as a musician, it was really nice to hear that. It was like, because it was not that we were done with rock albums, but it was just like, it was nice to hear a different spin on rock.
Sure.
And it was like, and then you listen to these tracks and you went, oh my God, these guys can play. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like that was, I remember my buddies and I sitting listening to some of these tracks, and I'm like, whoa, what
Yep.
the hell just happened?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
For me, it was the you know how I'm a big fan of track 11s. I reference it all the
Yeah.
time. I'm a big fan
Absolutely.
of the obscurity tracks, and
Yeah.
probably, and I put it on. It's in my shuffle all the time.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Yeah.
refrigerator car has never left my iPod or my
Yeah.
back in the day cassette. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Look, you and I could reminisce this whole time. But I think we should bring in Aaron because because of all the reasons that we just spoke about.
Yeah.
I want to bring in Aaron Comes, and I'd love to hear about how, especially over this pandemic, has it been hard to exist?
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey,
Nice to
good to
see you.
see you. Oh, really
Thanks
good
for
to see you.
thanks for that geographical education as well.
Well, if you ever make it up to these areas now, at least you got something to look at differently, right?
We'll talk about the East Coast another time, Aaron. There's a whole story with that too.
Cool. But hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for all those nice words you just said too. It really it's humbling and
Yeah.
very nice to hear. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I wonder, Aaron, actually, so I'll just throw one out here because I've often thought this. I know that the album took a while to catch on, at least as far as from the consciousness of like it came out in 91, but in 94, it was I think it was Two Princes was the most played song on the radio in like the history of radio or something. When you guys were in the studio, was there any sort of like feeling for you that, wow, this is going to be different than a lot of stuff that's out there? Or was it just like, this is just what we do?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were just trying to make a really good record that we loved, and I don't think when we were making the record, we really didn't have any huge expectations that we were going to have a big hit record or a hit single. We really just weren't thinking like that. We were a very self-contained New York City band, and our our main goal was like to play our own music that we wrote, have a fan base and make a living doing it, and of course we had high hopes. We wanted to do well, and I think we felt like we had a good. One of the great things about making a first album is you have all these songs that you've written to choose from, and we were a band. By the time we went in the studio for the first time for this record, we had been playing out live for about 3 years, maybe 2.5, 3 years, and most of those songs we also used to play like 5 nights a week, so like most bands, original music bands, played like once a month, and the goal for them, everybody else was trying to get a record deal, and we kind of flipped that, and our goal was to like play shows, pay our rent, and build up a fan base. And so the record companies came to us just organically. So when we went in to record those songs, we played a lot of those songs like 500 times already. You know what I mean? So we really they were ingrained in us, and we can talk about it as we go. We did make some arrangement changes in the studio, but we honestly, when we had the record, when it was done, I was so young. I mean, I think I was like 22 or something when the record came out, maybe 23. And so like, I didn't even like it anymore by the time it came out. Cause it came out like,
that's probably,
it had been done. It had been recorded and done for like a year by the time it came out. And, when you're young, you're really developing and growing, and you're very critical on yourself. And I honestly did not like the record. I didn't like my drumming on it. There's a lot of things I didn't like about it when it came out. I really love it now. When I hear it now, it just sounds really like honest and real and fresh still. And but it's different, and that's part of, there's that energy about you when you're young. And but I think we knew we had a really great record, but we didn't really, at least in the beginning, we weren't thinking it was going to be a big hit record. As time went on, because like you were saying, it took about 3 years or maybe 2 years till it really blew up. And but about a year in, we started to get a lot of confidence in the record because our fan base was growing. We were touring like crazy, and we were getting absolutely no help from our label, Epic Records. They weren't doing anything. They were putting all their money into Pearl Jam that year. So Pearl Jam was blowing up.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, the grunge thing was taken off. In fact,
Yeah.
our record, a lot of people don't realize our record came out 1 week before Nirvana's record.
Whoa.
Really?
I
Yeah,
did not
1
know
week.
that.
Wow.
And so Nirvana was out of the gate. You remember it was all over MTV.
Yeah.
And you know, we all owe a lot to them because that was really the shift in music.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden, you know, it wasn't all just super pop stuff on the radio. It wasn't
Yeah.
all like heavy metal. It just sort of turned a corner for more organic music.
Yeah.
So that really, even though we're different than a lot of those grunge bands, it really opened up the door for us.
Yeah.
But about a year in, the record label said, you know, we want you guys to come off the road and make a new record because we don't think there's any, this record's, we think it's dead. There's no hits. And we had sold about 65,000 copies at that point. This is about a year in. Pretty much just organically, just from our word of mouth and touring. And, you know, in 2022, if you could sell 65,000 records, that's considered a pretty big deal. You know?
Yeah.
Quite.
So even for us, that was a big deal then. It was we had enough of a fan base to where we were totally self-sufficient. We were touring around. We weren't taking any tour support. We were making money. We were packing clubs around the country. And so that's when we went in and had a meeting with all the top people at Epic, all the band members and our management. And they said, you know, we want you guys to come off the road, make a new record. And we were like, you know, we really feel like if you guys would maybe try to promote this a little bit, maybe release a song on the radio, we think that this record has a shot. We're seeing how well we're doing with our fan base.
Yeah.
And they just said, no, we're not into it. So we made a decision to go back on the road. You know, our manager, David Sonnenberg, who said he was the guy that did the biggest hit he had before us was Meatloaf. He did Bat Out of Hell.
Wow.
Bat Out of Hell was a similar story where the record was out for like a year and nothing happened. And they toured and toured and toured. And it just all of a sudden it took off. And David was like, you know, I really think we got to go back out on the road. I feel like something's gonna click here. We just need that one little thing to click, and this could totally turn around. So that's exactly what we did. We got back in our van, went back out on the road, and a few months later, a station in Vermont called WEQX added Little Miss Can't Be Wrong, and it went to #1. And the guy Jim McGuinn wrote a letter to the president of Epic, Richard Griffiths, telling him, you know, this song is #1. The phones are off the hook. You guys would be crazy if you didn't promote this band. This should be at least a gold record, you know. And that was what did it. And then they put out Little Miss, and you know, started at rock radio. MTV picked it up, and then it just turned into a big hit. And from there, the whole thing just blew up, you know.
I love that. I want to go back a little tiny bit. Is that you? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a very jam band style of playing. And I wonder about the psychology of having to nail down forms and tones when you're going into the recording studio. I can empathize with you that you may not have been 100% like I could have done that differently because you've heard it a million different versions, right? Yeah. How do you feel about that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, look, we knew we were making a record, and we know that, like, you know, a listening experience of a record is different than a live experience. And you're right. We always, particularly in the early days, but even still, we'll stretch out and we'll open things up, and we don't always play things exactly the same every night. But all of our songs have a set arrangement, and then there's sections of those songs that can extend. So, you know, we were conscious of that making the record, and we always would joke. We would call, like, we used to refer to certain songs as the white bread hits. It's the obvious songs. Like, this is before we made the record. Songs like Jimmy Olsen, Two Princes, Little Miss, Fat Funky Booty, those kind of songs. Because, like, our, you know, record companies were always trying to get us to play those, and we would always we loved them, but a lot of times we would just, like, I was thinking about this the other day. We were out in LA doing a showcase, and this is when we had put out an EP before we put out the record called Up for Grabs, a live EP. And so we're out there. We already recorded the record. We're out there doing this showcase for all the people at Sony, doing a 3-song set at the Roxy or something in LA. And what do? We play like 3 completely obscure songs that we've never recorded that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Like jammy and they just got so, you know, like our A&R guy Frankie LaRocca got so pissed. He's like, you know, what's wrong with you guys? I mean, what the hell are you doing? You know? And he's like, you know, you'll understand when you're older, but you know, but we didn't care. You know? We didn't give a shit. But but getting back to the point of the record, like we knew which songs, like a song like Jimmy Olsen or Two Princes or Little Miss, to have nice arrangements. And we've always been really at the center of it. We've always been a song oriented band. We just also
Mm,
love to stretch out, and we all love all kinds of music. So the improvisational element has always been a part of all of us individually and as a band. But we're really at the core of it. I mean, you got to have good songs, and we've always put a lot of pride and into our songwriting. And so, like I was talking about before, when we got around to making Pocket Full of Kryptonite record, I think it's 11 songs, and we didn't want to make a really long record. We've all always liked sort of classic records that aren't too long, where every song really has its place and stands out. But we have
right.
like 50 songs to choose from. We've always been a very prolific band, so we made a point to pick the songs that we called the white bread hits,
Yeah.
and more of the obscure stuff, like you mentioned, refrigerator car, and Shinbone Alley and Hard to
Yeah.
Exist, 40 or 50, and stuff like that. So yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, you hit it. Refrigerator car. I'm a fanboy for a second. Refrigerator car, and we were talking about before. I think you even showed up. That one of my favorite tracks is Shinbone Alley, and the fact that it goes into hard to exist. As a drummer, I absolutely loved this. The ride is what ties that entire both those
That's the
songs
thread.
together.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and to hear that syncopation go all the way through, my sister actually reminded me last week when I mentioned that I was talking to you about how she remembers that I was driving when we were younger and explaining to her, like on the steering wheel, what that was, like going from straight to compound to swing. And I was explaining, and I'm sure she rolled her eyes
She
heavily.
was
But
so interested in that, right?
yeah, that's exactly right. But she said that she remembers that me being in the car explaining that and how influential
cool.
that was.
And then that was one take, right, Aaron?
So there you go.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. But this is before Pro Tools. This was all
Yeah.
done on
That's
2-inch tape.
yeah.
No
Yeah.
editing. All live.
Oh my
So
God.
that was a long piece of music to get. But
Oh,
That's really funny. That's my sister. That's my sister right there, coincidentally in chat. That's funny. That's
there
funny.
you go.
Love
Yeah,
it.
that's a core memory. That's really funny.
Did she play it?
No, I don't think she can.
No, she could explain it.
Yeah. My explaining of it, I'm sure, was garbage back in the day. But neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Is there any, when I think about that album in particular, obviously, is there any processes that was new to you at the time that kind of resonated while being in the studio for any songs in particular?
Well, it's interesting. We made that record in 2 different sessions because originally, so Epic Records wanted to put out a EP first. So we went in the studio, we went into the Power Station in New York City, and I believe we cut 5 songs, 3 of which made the record. And those songs were Shinbone Alley, Hard to Exist, and Two Princes. Those were done at that session. And then the rest of the record was done at a session about 6 months later at RPM Studios. And the reason we didn't put out that first EP, I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad we held back for the record, is we decided, we're really a live band. We have this live fan base. Let's make our entrance into the world with a live EP. So we recorded a live show at the Wetlands. We released that live EP, which was called Up for Grabs, live at the Wetlands. So, but as far as we did some for that first session, the one with Two Princes made on and Hard to Exist, Shinbone Alley, we did some pre-production. A guy named Frank Aversa produced those sessions and also engineered them, along with Frankie LaRocca, who co-produced them. Frankie LaRocca was our A&R guy. He passed away about 10 years ago, sadly, but he's a great guy. He was a great drummer. He played with a lot of people in the 80s. So, but that was an interesting session. It was, we were pretty dialed in because we'd played so much live, but we did actually make some pretty important changes in that pre-production. Like, for instance, Two Princes we'll talk about Two Princes for a minute, because we we have some demos. I don't know if you've ever heard. They re-released the record about, I think, on the 20th anniversary, and we put out
2011, yeah, is when that was
and we
launched.
put out a bunch of demos and some extra tracks on that. And one of the demos is the Two Princes demo. And if you listen, it's quite a bit faster. We used to play it quite a bit faster, and I'll give myself credit. I actually suggested, let's slow the tempo down on this, because it always just felt like it was obviously a great song. It was a fan favorite from the get-go. People loved hearing that song. But it always felt a little, at least for me, it felt a little rushed, a little small. I felt like, this tune has a potential to have this really big, wide, fat groove, and so we pulled it back. And that really, I think, made a huge difference. It just opened up the song. I felt like the lyrics and the melody sat better at that tempo. And we were able to really create this sound, between the guitar sound and the drums and the bass and Chris's vocal. It's really a pretty simple track. There's not a lot of overdubs on it. It's mostly just, it's just drums, bass. There's, it's pretty much one guitar. There might be like a little bit of a guitar overdub, but it's just real simple, but everything has this really big sound. And the vocal too. There's no background vocals until the very end of the song, where the go ahead now tag thing happens, where there's some background vocals, and I put a tambourine in there. This gives it a little lift, but it's very simple. And we did not use a click track on anything on that entire record. No click track.
Oh, wow.
No click. Yeah, we never used a click.
Free in it.
Totally.
And, jamming it, going back to the roots. You resonated hard with me a second ago when you were like slowing it down, because one of my big takeaways from this album is, and I wondered if it was a production call, but you're kind of answering it right now, is the use of negative space. I'm a big fan of, I want to hear every silence between every guitar lick, everything, right? And sometimes there's a need to like put organ in there or put something in there to fill that space. And what I appreciate most about this album is that there is space between everything. You choose quarter notes in that ride cymbal so that there's space between every single note. The guitar licks are happening every few notes, very bluesy. So that you're answering that. That wasn't necessarily a production call. That's what the band was.
That's just what we were. Yeah. I mean, really. I mean, I think one of the things that makes the record so cool is that it really is just an organic thing. It wasn't. And like the second session we did, which is the entire rest of the record, we didn't do any pre-production. We just went in the studio and pretty much did it. And in that case, when you're in the studio, you make some calls right there on the floor. Like, for instance, Refrigerator Car. This is a great example of something just happened on the spot. So Refrigerator Car was a song we've been playing for about a year. And it's funny. I remember I was just a little bit about how the writing of that song happened. I was hanging out with Chris one day. We were at his house in Brooklyn. He used to live with the Blues Traveler out there. This must be like 1990 or something. And he was just like, "Hey, we should write a song in 9," and usually, and I like odd times, but I never usually write a song in a time frame because it's to be like cool. It's just like sometimes something just comes out like that.
Yeah.
And so Chris was like, let's write a song in 9. So I came up with that riff right then and there, just sitting in his room. I came up with that riff. And then well, not that. No, not that yet. The dun 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 dun. I wrote that on guitar.
Okay, yeah.
So then I showed that to Eric. We were in rehearsal one day, and Chris was late to rehearsal. So me and Eric and Mark were hanging out, and I showed that to Eric, and he had these other 2 parts, and we just sort of put them together. And like all of a sudden we had this beast of a piece of music, and Chris comes in like an hour late, and hey man, check this piece of music out, and he sits there and I don't know whether Chris has a lot of lyrics. He's always writing. He's always got notebooks with him. So I got to ask him. I don't remember whether he wrote those lyrics on the spot or if he dug some lyrics that he had and maybe a little of both. But he sat there for about an hour and we just played it over and over. And then he came up and sang that stuff, and that tune just came together. And all of a sudden we had this beast. But again, there's a demo version of that doesn't have the intro, and it's also a little bit faster. So we're in the studio getting ready to record Refrigerator Car, and 5 minutes before we're about to start, I start just messing around playing the guitar riff on the drums. That boom, boom, blah,
Cool.
and Eric's like, "That's cool. Let's make an intro," So I start doing that. He starts like sort of playing half the riff, and then we build it in, and then it goes to the ride, and then into the song. So that whole intro section, that whole drum intro into that thing, that happened like right then and there before we recorded the song. That's a great example of just like sort of on the spot, really cool moment. And a lot of that kind of stuff happened during that record, especially the second time because we didn't do pre-production.
I'm really enjoying hearing off the cuff, the fact that everything's happening off the cuff. There's too many albums, as you know. Well, I don't want to say too many, but maybe the right amount of albums that have years of pre-production. So that when you go in the studio, you know every hit, you've played it ad nauseum, you know every single thing so that it falls together. That takes a lot of trust and a lot of freedom of the producer to just know that we're working with something gold here.
Yeah,
how did that relationship with your producer work?
Yeah, well, it was great. And the guy that took over the production for the second half was Peter Denenberg, great engineer, producer. But we were co-producing as well. So it's like, we were the kind of band that was like, we were going to do what we wanted to do. You know what I mean? There was no way somebody was going to come in and tell us what to do. In fact, like I just told this story the other day. I did John DeChristopher's show. And I love telling this story, but when we recorded Two Princes, that first session at Power Station, the producer was trying to get me to play a big, deep drum because they were still sort of thinking like, well, this is what's on the radio. It's like the big gated reverb. We're still coming out of the 80s. And that was not our vibe. That was not our vibe at all. We didn't want anything to do with that. We're like, we had what we hoped was a fresh sound. And so I had my Brady snare drum. It was a Brady kit, and I had a bunch of Brady snare drums, and I wanted to use my Brady Jar Piccolo on Two Princes, and we had to fight for it. We were fighting for it for hours. They really wanted me to use this big, deep drum, and but we weren't having it. And we stuck to our guns, and obviously it's a good thing because that's a big character of the song.
Yeah, for sure. And I find really interesting, Aaron, is if anyone you talk to, of course, they reference the snare, myself included. I mean, my whole snare sound was based on you for the entire 90s. It was just like, but what I also, as I delved into these songs more recently, when you listen, and this is something a producer friend has told me in the past, is that when you listen to an instrument like the Two Princes snare, there's other things too that make it sound like that much better. Like, for example, Bonham sounded so big because of the way that Jimmy Page's guitars were played and recorded. And to me, why that snare sounds so good to me is when I've been listening to your kick on Pocket, on What Time Is It? And that kick has the richest, most, it's like the kick sings almost in my mind. There's this third instrument going on. It's not just a kick. There's a sustain to it too. But then there's also like some of the hi-hat work and even some of the ride work that you do that snare sounds so much better when you can hear those other things going on. Was there a reason you picked that snare, or was it just like I just happened to have that snare in front of me?
I mean, that was I fell in love with the Brady drums. I'd recently gotten a Brady kit and gotten like 3 or 4 snare drums. And I just knew that was the sound that I wanted on this record, and it was a crisp sound. Those drums and that snare really cut through. They blended well with Mark and Eric and Chris. And you're right. I memean, like, what you said about like the instruments blending together, I mean, I've always thought about like, you have a band and let's say this band, we have drums, bass, guitar, and vocal. Everybody's got to play together. You can't, the sounds you make have to, what you're playing and sonically, if you can find that blend, everybody's going to sound better. And it's the same thing in a drum kit. I've always thought of the drum kit almost like a little band inside of a band. You got your bass drum, snare drum, and all your different instruments here, and they have to blend together. And a lot of it is, the way you're hitting those the level and the way you're touching those different instruments. Like
Yeah.
how are you hitting your hi-hat, or how are you hitting your ride, your crash, not bashing too loud, just being whatever it is you like to do, but sort of being aware of the levels of those different components working together to
Yeah.
make one really good, rich sound. So it's cool.
Yeah.
What you just said is really intuitive. I mean, and I've always kind
Yeah.
of thought like that when I play.
Yeah. Well, especially I as a cover artist in the 90s. I mean, of course we were learning your guys' stuff. I learned just from learning Two Princes. I learned to be a better drummer because I mean, at the time I was doing the whole kind of not Weckel's necessarily suggestion, but Weckel buried the kick or the beater a lot. And I found when you played Princes, that's literally like that's not a good way to do that song because it just it takes away some of the energy that you're gonna be doing as the drummer. And also when I started listening to what my kit sounded like when I played it not buried, and then when I actually played it to let the kick sing, which is to me the secondary so important part of that groove is that kick sound and the way that the kick is played. It's like this, it's like the cream with the coffee, right? Like the snare's the coffee, but that kick is the cream. And it just, there's a touch you have to have with that song. And of course, all the ghosting that's on it.
Right.
But so then, which leads me to my question then, as much as everyone wants to know what was the snare, what was the kick, and how did you get that sound? Because that sound, your kick sound throughout the album to me is like, to this day, it's the best kick sound I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's also a Brady 22-inch kick drum. I believe it was pretty deep. I don't know the depth, but it's a little deeper than your standard. I can't remember what head I had on it. A felt beater, but I don't like to hit the bass drum too hard. Like, like you don't like, you can get like plenty of volume, and I find you actually get, at least for me, I get more sound out of a drum when I don't play into it. And the bass drum is a good example. When you really hit the bass drum too hard, especially if you dig into it, it just, it kind of dies, or chokes. And I find that in the studio, and I remember, early on working in the studio, luckily I realized quickly, what sounds good and what doesn't, and I found that, that at least for me, when I don't hit as hard, I actually end up getting a bigger sound out of the drums.
It also gave room for the technology to do its job, in my opinion. Because and not to say this too poignantly, but it was obvious in my eyes that you weren't a heavy, hard hitter, because the compressor on that snare, the compression on the cymbals, actually was able to really do its job nicely.
Right, which is why you hear all those ghost notes, because we had the compression hitting hard to tape, and there's a lot of room in there. So with room, if you hit the cymbals too hard, it just washes out. So it's like that. It's sort of that fine line. And luckily, we just really found a beautiful balance. Talking about that song. I mean, look, it was recorded in one of the best sounding drum rooms in the world, which is Studio A at the Power Station. Beautiful drums. We utilized the room. It was recorded to 2-inch tape. Everything just sort of clicked, and
Is there just so we can double down on one thing in particular, and I hate asking what your favorite song is, because I'm not going to do that, but I'm sure that there is one song in particular that resonates hard with you from butts to nuts, that the process of recording, like pre-production, writing, everything right to the end, where you walk away going, wow, that turned out exactly the way I wanted it to, and that makes me smile every time I even hear that song?
Well, I don't think I felt that way on anything after we did it, because like I was saying before, I was 22.
Well, I thought maybe there was one.
nothing was ever good enough back then, But sure. I mean, but I hear it now. Like I said, I mean, honestly, I think I really like the whole album, and I like different songs for different reasons. And it's funny that I would choose this, but I think in a lot of ways the perfect track that we did was Two Princes, And it's like,
sure.
And even though it's the big hit, and it's probably like the least obvious for most people, I always pick the obscure one, but like, it just sounds like, I feel like we really nailed it. It's just got like even more than a lot of the other tracks. I can hear all the little things that, like, they don't bug me anymore, but like little little subtle things that maybe aren't perfect on the recordings. And I've grown to actually really like those things. I like that sort of imperfection in music. But I think, but like Two Princes, it's just we just nailed it. It's just the feeling of it, the sound of it, the song, and I'm really glad because I have to hear it all the time to this day, and
Yes.
I'd really cringe
Yes.
if I heard something that wasn't. I listen to it, it sounds good, so I'm just like, thank God it actually that we really did good on that one.
It's a song. It's a song like "Don't Stop Believing," where when it comes on, nobody shuts it off. Like,
Yeah.
And let's be very honest. We're in Canada. Everybody knows the name Spin Doctors. Everybody, but and I don't want this to be a shot across the bow. Everybody knows it because of Two Princes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
Right.
listen. I mean, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. It's like to have a song that's done so well worldwide, and it really keeps us going to this day. If we didn't have that, we probably wouldn't be working and playing and have the fan base we have. So it's I completely appreciate it. I would have never guessed in a million years that song and Little Miss too would still get so much airplay 30 years later. It's like it's one of those hits that's really managed to like stick around, and so I mean, we're very grateful for that. But also, like, on the flip side of Two Princes, if I had to pick one other one, maybe that it's like I mean, one of my is Shimbo Alley.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's a real sort of classic of what the Spin Doctors are. On the other side of the like Two Princes pop side, it's really just a great representation of our sound, of all the members of the band. It's just really classic, and it's rocking, and I love it.
It's non-apologetic in a way that you drive that ride cymbal right through the verse.
Yeah.
Like most, really, when you learn in drums, hi-hats during the verses, ride during the chorus. That's what you're supposed to do. Spoiler alert. And you broke that. You're like, nope. This ride is pushing right through this entire situation and driving it.
It's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of my background is in jazz, and that kind of a song, it's not your typical rock song. The way the guitar, you have the bass, you have the riff that Mark's playing throughout, and Eric's playing the guitar line, but he's doing sort of like this, almost sort of the way a jazz piano player would comp, throwing in some long chords and inversions. And I just felt like I needed to be there with that and have it stay open and be able to build the verse sort of throughout as it goes up. And just having the cymbal that I was, it was able to do that and it just felt more part of it than maybe the hi-hat. And then I go to the hi-hat on the bridge, and it's kind of a cool, sort of goes into more of a bottom thing on the bridge, it's cool, but it's an interesting thing that you say, because you're right. Normally 9 times out of 10 you would start on the hat.
Yeah.
Right.
It will always take me back to, but you already answered it, is that there's somebody in the booth that's making executive decisions and is actually like, by the way, a very quick story. I once worked with a producer, and he was like, something's not feeling right during this break. I don't know what it is. And he kept coming in going, there's something you're doing that's just not feeling right. And it ended up, we isolated it, that I was doing a flam. I just did a flam on the end of this phrase. And he's like, you're not hitting those sticks at the same time on the snare. And I'm like, no, it's a flam. It's, This is what it is. It's dynamically, this is what it is. And he's like, no, I don't like that at all. Don't do that. That was messing up everything. In retrospect, he wasn't getting it, and everybody in the room agreed that it was better with it. But he was the one making the executive call on it, so that's how it was tracked. And to this day, whenever, rarely I ever hear that song, I always just hear this one snare hit. It's weird.
Yeah.
But
well, like, and in that
somebody's
case,
taking executive decision. So I wondered if somebody's doing that during this album at all. You got a lot of freedom.
We were making the executive decision.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's great.
Ultimately, people, I mean, we would get suggestions, from the producers, and always open to suggestions. But ultimately, if it didn't feel right to us, we didn't do it. Yeah. It had to feel right.
Yeah. And that's the
difference between being in a band and like, going in and doing a session as a studio musician. If I'm working with somebody else and the producer or the artist makes a suggestion, then I'm going to do it. I'm not going to fight them. It's their record, and I'm there to, and I'm happy to do that. But in a band, it's a different thing. And you have to, and I think that's why, like, this record is a great example of, that's why it has all this character, because it's just all this personality from all of us. And if anybody tried to take that away and make it more, tailor ready, radio, it's just going to kill it, And I think that, like, a lot of times people make the mistake of trying to do something that's going to get on the radio, or trying to do something that's going to sound like everything that's selling at this moment. I feel like that's always the wrong path to go, because there's already somebody else doing popular. That's why it's popular. They're there already. What's going to happen next? If you're making a record now, where's it going to be in a year? And if you're doing something unique, then that's stick to it, And you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Living Color, and and again, we formed the Spin Doctors in late '88, and we went in the studio and recorded this record, like, I don't know, it must have been '90 or something, or '91. Came out late '91, I think. So the record industry was still sort of living in, like, Guns N' Roses and heavy metal,
Motley Crue,
super pop. But all of a sudden, you had a band like Living Color, which we loved. They were a big influence. New York City band. I know all those guys. And James Dixon was another one that was doing well. Yeah. Also, like, so there was all of a sudden this sort of thing that was happening. And then again, like I said, Nirvana blew the roof off and it opened the door. But we were coming. We had our own voice, and nobody was going to tell us what to do.
Yeah. I wonder too, Aaron, like, when you guys went in this, like, for a debut album, I'm sure you had been in a recording studio prior to this, but was this the first time you had done, like, kind of a soup to nuts, full package, full album? And, like, what kind of things did you were there things that were shocking to you, or was it like, that's kind of what I expected to do with a whole album?
I had certainly, again, I was like 21. I had some experience in the recording studio, like recording with people in high school, and I'd done a few. I went to Berkeley for a year, so I did some recording that year in Boston with some different bands, both jazz and rock. And so I did have some experience, but not a lot. And the Spin Doctors had made 2, I guess you could call them demos, but things that we would sell at our shows. But I didn't have a lot of experience. This was definitely the first time. This was the first real big session I had ever done, going into the power stage. So, to criticism, it's funny. I'll probably never have anything that's successful again. It's like the very first one I did, But I was prepared. I mean, I worked really hard. I was a guy that put a lot of time into music and drumming since I started, and I had great teachers. I practiced a lot. I practiced, a lot with the metronome. I would work on I spent just as much time working on my groove and pocket as I did on my chops and technique. And so, like, I knew, and I'd also seen what happened to a lot of guys in the '80s. As soon as the click track came in, anybody, and this happened to a lot of guys in bands, that maybe they were great drummers, but they weren't as polished. And all of a sudden they couldn't cut it in the studio and play to a click. And they got axed, so they didn't get to play on the record. I mean, it happened a lot in the '80s. Yeah. It was really happening. At the time, I saw that happening, read about it, heard about it, knew people that happened to, and I was just like, well, this is definitely not going to happen to me. And I'm going to be. So I want to know that whenever I get that shot, this is even before I met the Spin Doctors. Whenever I get that shot to do a record, I'm going to be prepared. So really, it felt natural to me. I mean, it just felt, it was fun. It was exciting. Yeah. I didn't feel a tremendous amount of pressure, even though it was a major label recording. Like I said, we weren't going in there. It's not like they were rolling out the red carpet for us at all. We just went in there. Right. So it was we're in this fancy big studio, but it was still like, it didn't feel super high pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. No suits and ties sitting behind the producer's desk with gavels.
They might come in and take a listen, but they didn't really give a shit. Like, honestly, I think Epic signed us. They were just like, let's sign these guys. They got a big following. We'll see what happens. But they weren't coming around thinking like, this is going to be the next big thing. They're just, I don't know what they were thinking, but so
you're actually segueing into my next question. As a matter of fact, is how did you get on the radar of the record label to even do any opportunities like this?
Well, we had just a big, huge following in New York City. I mean, we were bringing 900 people into the wetlands, before we had a record deal. So it was just,
Wow.
it was a real scene in New York, and there's a few bands, Blues Traveler, good friends
Yep.
of ours. They were like they got a record deal about a year before we did.
I was going to ask about John Popper's involvement in the album as well, but you keep going. Yeah.
So we used to play shows together. We both played shows. A lot of the scene would sort of go between both bands. Joan Osborne was playing around at the time. She was part of the scene, and there was this whole circuit, that sort of was based around certain clubs. And so it was sort of an undeniable thing. It's like you walk in and there's 800, 900 people that are singing your songs. It was just something was going to happen. And so we got a manager. We started to get, at this point, all kinds of offers. It was like people wanted to, we were just getting every night somebody would come up to us and say they want to manage us or sign us. And we were just like, we didn't really want to have any of it because everybody just felt like a bunch of snakes. We're in New York City. We very cautious and protective of what we created.
You didn't want to sell out. Is
we
the
didn't
term back then for sure.
Yeah, we didn't want to give it away to somebody who wasn't. So David Sonnenberg, who was a pretty reputable guy, and he had a lot of success. And we went into his office, and he said, you guys are great. He'd come to see us. He'd blah blah blah. He wanted to sign us, and he could get us a record deal. And he was expecting us to just say, "Great, where do we sign?"
Yep.
But we actually looked him in the eye and said no.
Dragon's Den styles.
He was like, screw. Yeah. And I love this guy. We still work with him. He's a great guy. But he was like squirming in his desk because nobody ever, who says no, And
right.
And we went out, So he called us back, and he said he had us come back in the office. He said, "Listen, I really, really want to work with you guys. How about this? Give me, I forget what it was. It was either I think it was 30 days. It was either 30 or 60 days. If I don't get you a major record deal within 30 days or 60 days, whatever it was, then we'll rip up the contract." I would set it in the contract, and then that's it.
Right. Yeah.
So he delivered. We had 4 or 5 different offers, from labels, and we went with Epic. So, wow. But it really happened organically. It was kind of an undeniable scene at the time. But again, once we signed, it was like they didn't give a fuck.
That's amazing. But as a band, you guys were all unified in your thinking and your objection. Like, this is our trajectory and where we can imagine things going, and you were all along for the same ride. That's rare, and I think you probably know that for everybody to be on the same page. And maybe, and I don't want to dig at anything, maybe there was some politics where some people were not on the same page, and there was a lot of convincing that maybe needed to happen.
Yeah, but, I think we were pretty much on the same page. There's always situations where people don't disagree. To this day, it's part of being in a band. But we all had the same goal, and we were all very dedicated to what that was, which is, again, it really was just to make good music and play good shows and make a living doing it. That was always part of it was this is our job. We were realistic. We want to pay our rent. Before we had a record deal, it was how are we going to pay our rent in New York City and play music? We're going to do it by playing 5 nights a week and going out and promoting ourselves and getting people to come to the shows and being good, And so we kept that same approach when the record came out, and we just hit the road. It was just gig, grow it grassroots. And, and luckily the timing was right. There was this sort of scene happening with Blues Traveler and the Fish and that whole jam band scene. Yep. And we were really right in the middle of that.
I was listening to a lot of you and Dave Matthews at the same time. Lots of it. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
So anyway.
So you've hit it on the head with Blues Traveler. That I knew that he was on the album, but I'm just learning now that you guys were tight-knit. Tell me a bit about that. Yeah.
So Popper grew up with Chris. They went to high school together in Princeton. So they were buddies since they were kids. And then Eric knew Popper as well from the New School. We were all going to the New School. That's where we all kind of met. And I remember the very first day I showed up in New York and went to school. everybody was jamming in the auditorium, and I looked to my left, and there's this freak of nature harmonica player.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck is this guy? He sounded like that then.
Hard to miss. He was a big guy back then, by the way.
Big, very big guy. And he's always just been like, he was basically in the band. Our very first gig, Popper was there. He played with us in the very first gig we ever did. He's always been an honorary spin doctor. We just played in a festival down in Mexico. The Blues Travelers on. Popper played with us. We're playing with those guys in a few weeks in North Carolina. We go way back. And so Popper just made, there was no way Popper wasn't going to play on that record. So he came in and played on More Than She Knows,
Yep.
And ripped it up, over the
he
top.
tore it up on that, dude. Like, it's undeniably him enough that when you hear it, your ears perk up and go, is that John Popper? And you don't even need to.
We used to joke to him. We used to joke with him after he did it. It's like, John, there's absolutely not one minuscule of a space you could play another note. So,
oh man.
But he's so amazing. Oh, and he also played on Off My Line. He's just incredible. John Popper is a freak of nature, and like you said, he's one of those musicians where you know who it is instantly. So recognizable. Nobody plays like that.
Well, he's playing a unique instrument as well. So if he showed up on a Pat Metheny album, you'd know exactly that it's him.
Yeah.
A bad example, Pat Metheny, please.
Yeah. But he's great. And Blues Traveler, we have a big history with them, and particularly in those early days in New York City, it's really amazing.
Go ahead.
Yep.
I was going to say that it's interesting, Aaron. The reason I picked this album for the show Liner Notes is there is a lot of liner notes in Pocketful of Kryptonite, and there's a lot of history there. But one of the things I didn't realize was that there is actually some edited thing, the liner notes Pocket. That's creepy. And both I were like, "Who's Cream Cree, and how do you get writing liner?"
All the megabytes aren't making to your house.
Yeah. Okay. I think
it. Sean just upgraded his system to Cat 8 cable, which, by the way, is 2 more than the average person.
Apparently it didn't work though.
There you go, back now.
But what he's asking.
So Cream McCree.
Oh, okay.
The liner notes. Cream McCree was somebody that she was a writer. She wrote for some newspapers and stuff in town, and she was somebody that used to, like I said, it was such a scene in New York City around these bands, and Cree was one of these people that was pretty much at every show. She was a friend. It's like all these people were friends, and so she was hanging around, and she had written some articles for us, and so it just seemed perfect to get Cree to write the liner notes because she knew everything about the music and the band, and she was part of the whole scene. So it was great.
She's a writer for Downbeat.com, Downbeat magazine, actually, right now, by the looks of it.
She's done all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense too because there's a bit about writing a story for a band. It only makes sense to someone who is close and knew the band that makes sense to have them write. It's that's really cool.
Yeah,
he's sounding robotery, right?
Yeah.
That was fun. That was fun.
I think I heard what you said.
Yeah, having somebody work so closely with the band, Cree seems like she was pretty close to the band, so it seems definitely appropriate, right? Yeah. Sorry, Sean, you're glitchy there, Bubs.
My Cat 8 sucks ass.
You're down to Cat 7.
It was nice that you had liner notes and people would actually read them back then. Now it's like you can't even get credits. So
right.
No. We've talked about it. We've talked about it on stream before. Is especially when you're trying to inspire younger kids to get into playing musical instruments, you want to be able to inspire them to be able to listen to a song and then hunt down who played on that song. If I love the drums on, it could be a Katy Perry album, it could be anybody, it could be Justin Bieber, for Christ's sake. Sure. But you want to be able to find that answer quick, and it was as easy as opening a CD or a cassette or an album. And now it requires a bit of a rabbit hole,
Yeah, that was the whole thing, looking and seeing what musicians played on records, and I mean, you can find it now, but it's harder. And
Yeah.
even now, I mean, I know because I play on a lot of records, and like sometimes it's hard for people unless you like. It's almost like you have to promote yourself these days because
Yes.
artists don't do it for you, and often you can't even find credits.
Right.
No.
And even more and more lately, like it just seems like it's just so often that it'll just be like the artist and the producer and the writer. And, it's very hard to track down musicians.
And arrogantly, we snare sound, people won't necessarily recognize you right away. So they gotta hunt you down. You kind of want that on paper. You're like, hey, I played on this album, just so you know, my name is on here. It's kind of a trophy, kind of back in the day, and now, now with the unsung heroes,
even with and this is a good example of an album that Chris is such an interesting and unique songwriter. Like a lot of his lyrics are like they're so even for the time, like especially for the time, but even to this day hold up. Like she holds a shotgun while you do-si-do. Like it just to me, you needed to also read some of these lyrics to understand. Even I remember our singer trying to figure out Two Princes, like trying to vocalize, and it was just like he's like, damn, how the hell did he do this?
Yeah, but, Chris is a great lyricist and singer, and I remember when I first met him, he was definitely like the least experienced out of all of us. The rest of us had played in bands before, and Chris was just this guy that he'd played in some bands, and he was playing, he played acoustic, and he had a lot of songs he had written, but he didn't have a lot of experience really being in a band. I remember I taught him, like, Chris, like, I'll give you the drum fill. That's when you come in on the top of the verse, And
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah.
But I remember, like, right out the gate, Chris, I just heard right away, like, wow, this guy has this really unique style, and he's really soulful. Like, he has this sort of bluesy, soulful thing in his voice, and just a real character to his voice. It's not like, this. And he's a very, don't take this the wrong way. It's not like this. He doesn't have this huge. He's not like a singer's singer. You know what I mean? But like it's more like originality and character. But he's also honestly, and I've worked with a lot of singers. He's one of the best singers I've ever worked with. His pitch and his time. I mean, it's pretty impeccable. And I've played a lot with this guy, and I have him nice and loud and clear on my monitor. And a lot of times he'll look at me during the gig and I'll be like, "Am I in pitch?" And I'm always like, "Yeah." I mean, because he's dead on. He's dead on.
Yeah. And did a lot of his lyrics get written as you guys were going along, or did he kind of bring? How did the songs? Did they start from a lyric standpoint, or did they start from melodies?
I mean, some of the stuff he had already written, and a lot of the stuff was collaborated, like, as we were going along. I mean, we were very, we wrote a lot of songs, and Chris is one of these guys where he's just a great lyricist. He never runs out of ideas. He's always got notebooks for stuff, but he's the kind of guy where, and I'm really lucky, especially, it's one of the things that actually hooked me into wanting to be in the band was that I started writing. I got to write some songs, and, like, in fact, one of the songs, probably the song that really got me, like, into this band was 40 or 50. It's one of the songs on the record.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a song that I wrote the music to. And we were doing this is really early on. Like, I had only been in the band for like a couple months. We really just formed. And we were hanging out up at the new school, and we were doing like some 4-track recording. And we were recording pretty much all the songs that we had written. We were recording, and I had this piece of music, and I showed Chris. I said, "Hey, man, I got this piece of music. What do you, I'd love you to write something to it." And I played it for him, and he loved it. And he sat there, and in 30 minutes, whatever, he had these lyrics, and we recorded it on a little 4-track, and boom. And I was like, "Well, this is cool, because this is like, to be in a band. First you want to like." It's got to be a great band. It's got to be with good musicians. There's got to be good songs, but you also want to feel like you're part of something. And for me, I've always considered myself more than just a drummer. And to commit so much time to being part of something, it was important for me to have that creative outlet. So as soon as I realized, wow, I can actually contribute to the writing, and these guys are into it, they want me to do it, they like it. Because a lot of times, a guitar player doesn't want you to show him, hey, here's some music. What do you think?
Yeah.
I get that. A lot of bands wouldn't even. But Eric's great like that too. Like he loves my stuff, and so that's really been a great thing. That's kept me really interested. And so that song, that was sort of the thing that like turned me around. At first, I was like, okay, I'm in this band, but I might be in 10 bands, or I might get a better gig next week. This is really early in the game.
Yeah.
After that, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stick with this for a year, put all my eggs into this basket, at least to a certain point. If it doesn't look like it's going in the right direction, then I'll spread my wings, because but I as things went on, they just got better and better, and obviously it worked, but that was a turning point for me for sure.
40 or 50 is a super underrated tune. Underrated tune.
Cool
and
song.
it doesn't get enough spotlight. I totally agree with you.
Listen,
great tune.
just to have it on the that's the cool thing about this record is like, I mean, obviously there's the big songs, the hit songs, or even songs that might not have been top 40 hits, but like, What Time Is It, or Jimmy Olsen Blues, or How Could You Want 'Em? That's another one that I wrote the music to as well.
Cool.
But
Really?
the thing is that record did so well, and it was back in the time where, if people heard a song on the radio, they went out and they bought the whole record.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they listened, which is why the record sold 10 million copies, because people actually bought records,
Yeah.
Right.
Now, if you hear a song, you're just going to stream it on whatever. So,
Yeah.
it's a real album, and people really listen to that album. And so, like, even now, we play those songs, even like a song like 40 or 50, people react to it. You hear a little like, so it's like, it's we're lucky. I think, the timing was a really good time to like do what we were doing, because when you think about it, that was sort of the luck involved. We had a strong record. The tide was shifting in popular music at the time. The record industry had never been better because CDs were just coming out. So there was so much money in the industry, because record companies were all of a sudden making like double, because they were selling records. People were going back and buying catalog again.
Right.
MTV was exploding, which was
agreed.
Like,
Yep.
So it was just, records were selling like hotcakes. If you're lucky enough, it was hard as hell to have a hit, but if you were lucky enough, to get on MTV or get on the radio, you actually had a chance. And we were lucky. Just it all worked out. I mean, had it happened a year earlier, a year later, who might not have worked.
Who knows? Yeah.
Two things, because you touched on some awesome subjects here. Number one, as drummers, I can absolutely appreciate what you touched on earlier about playing fills down the toms, is that it gave me a definite vibe that those were cues that you were given to people. Like it was, just subconsciously, I love how you go down the toms. There's no fucking around. Like you're either going over the bar line onto 2, or you're ending on 1. But either way, when you go down those toms, I know something awesome is about to happen. So,
I like, it's funny.
all that.
I kind of got that. I was when I first moved to New York City in '88. I studied with Bernard Purdy for a year.
Oh, beautiful.
Which was incredible, and he was a big influence. And one of the things I noticed about Purdy were his fills, where like he did that a lot, where his fills were just, he didn't mess around. It was just like simple, and like I really gravitated towards that in thinking of fills like, okay, well, if you're gonna stop grooving and play a fill, you really need to make the fill part of the groove. So like that kind of idea of just that straight thing and it's almost like it's just an extension of the groove, because there's nothing more disrupting than everything's coming along nicely. You're playing a groove, and then a fill comes and it just feels like the bottom drops out, or and so I was really conscious of that. With this band is like not disrupting the feel. Also, at our shows, our crowd used to love to dance. Like
right.
We went to a Spin Doctors concert back then. Everybody in the room was dancing. So I'm the drummer, so like I need to keep them dancing. You know what I mean? So like,
yes.
I thought about that when I was you know, in my playing. It was just keeping that flow going. So, you know, those sort of constant types of fills are, that's sort of why I think, you know, and
There's a,
I
definitely
think
Purdy. I remember specifically seeing Purdy do that and just being like, that's really cool.
what resonates, especially as a young drummer that was playing your grooves, was you inspired me in that I can't play Hard to Exist, which I still jam, without going over the bar line with that the tom fill.
Oh, right, and then back
Yeah.
into the
But
and then I hit the snare. That's another Purdy thing, like hit it going down
beautiful,
the snare.
right?
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
But we
and that
talked
whole Purdy shuffle too. Let's not forget that.
You totally do. That's right. Perfect example. But we talked about it with Mitch from the Crash Test Dummies last week, is that there are some iconic, as the drummer, if you're going to do a cover of a song, you can't not do that. The audience is waiting for certain things to do. And if we're hearkening back to Two Princes, as a drummer, you're not doing Two Princes unless you've really worked on your ghost notes. Let's be clear.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a major part of that groove.
Absolutely.
I'll joke with it's funny, Chris, you know, he'll turn around during the guitar solo of that song and, you know, just come hang out with me or look at me. And every now and then I'll groove and I'll joke around and I won't play the ghost notes.
Oh, terrible.
And he's always like, no.
You're such a tease. Yeah.
It's just an inside joke, a little inside stage joke. But yeah, that's the whole thing with that song. Again, more Purdy. I mean,
but it's your playing. Is what I wanted to get at. What I wanted to get at is that's the style of you. When I hear that, that is your character of drumming. Is all these elements actually make it you, and that's what excites me. And I sound like a fanboy, but that's what excites me. Kind of talking to you is, it's your playing that is plastered all over this iconically. So thank you for that. Yeah.
You know, it's just, and you know how it is. You hope to come up with your own sound and style, and it's just a combination of all your favorite drummers mixed in together.
Always,
you spit it out, and you know, hopefully it comes out sounding like you. And you know, that stuff you're talking about. A lot of what I got, particularly in that time, was a direct influence from Bernard Purdy. And I don't even know if I realized it at the time, but like thinking back about sort of some of those developments, you know, I was studying with Bernard, I was listening to his music a lot. He's always been one of my favorite drummers. And, you know, look, I mean, Ghost Notes, he's the king of that.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I loved that rolling undercurrent groove thing that he did. And so that's certainly a major influence on my style.
It was we know that drummers use that style of playing. I think we all do, but a lot of the time from a production angle, it is cut out. There's gates on that snare, and you do not hear it. And this was one of the first times where it was spotlit the entire album.
Yeah,
and it caused this little bit of rumble, at least within my community of drumming. Is like, what the hell's going on there? Oh, everybody does that a lot of the time, by the way. But now we can just hear it all much more. So,
well, that the gate thing was so overused in the '80s. I mean, and I remember when we first started touring live, because you know when we were playing around New York City, most of the clubs, the drums weren't going through the PA. You know, so you sounded like yourself. It was great. And once we started playing bigger venues, you know, we'd get sound men. You know, we'd always be burning through sound men. But I remember all these guys. They were coming out of the '80s, and they would gate the snare and they'd gate the bass drum, and I could hear it. I'm like,
totally.
I actually, you know, I like to play with dynamics. I come down to a part of a song where I'm barely hitting the bass drum. Like, what happened to the bass drum? You know, or like you said, where's the ghost notes? And I'd always have to tell people, get rid of the gates. Take the way everybody mixed going out of heavy metal because everything was so loud. You know, all of a sudden it had some subtleties in your playing. A lot of people, you're right, a lot of it didn't get heard. So I was really aware of that. I remember particularly, it was never an issue in the studio because it was obvious that it was an important part of the sound. But like I remember fighting live with that, like having, you know, at the beginning of having to, you know, fight with sound men. Like, dude, take off the gate.
Grace notes in the bass drum in particular are eliminated heavily.
Yeah.
War on gates. Wow.
And that's to me that's an interesting concept too, is to take because you guys it seems like you guys basically developed because you played so much. This album naturally developed just by virtue of the fact that you had played so much, and like you say, that's not common. But then to do the album, which, was obviously was sort of formed by your live experience, and then to take that, but now you've packaged it, and now you've stamped that timestamp on it. So this is what we are. And now let's go back out again. And now people are familiar with that, especially if maybe they're not a fan. But now you have to, how to put it is that you have to now sound like the hour. How do you present that now as a live performance? Because now we've recorded it.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of that you guys had to face, or especially coming out of the time?
We didn't pay any attention to it. Like, we honestly, we kind of like made that record, didn't think about it, and just kept doing what we were doing. You know what I mean? It wasn't really until the record started to really hit that I think all of a sudden we became a little more aware of it, or other people made us aware of it. Like, maybe like, it's so funny. Like, I heard something recently. Somebody posted something of Two Princes, and it was like when Two Princes was a huge hit, and Chris wasn't doing the how
do you not do that?
Well, exactly. Chris used to, that was a spot where Chris always just improvised some scat thing there. He did it different every night. And then when we went in the studio, he came up with that thing, and it was like, okay, that's good. That'll work. But then he never did it again. And then it was like, and I was shocked when I heard that recently. I was like, holy shit, he's not doing that thing, and of course he does it now, because it became this iconic thing. But it's like,
you just put the microphone to the audience and just let them do it because everybody knows it. But
I mean, like I said, we were really young, and like I remember like that guy Frankie LaRocca, when we did that showcase, we're playing for the record company, trying to get them into us, and we played 3 songs that aren't even on a record. I mean, that's just, you could say that's like cool, or you could always say that you could argue that's stupid too, but that's just
rebellious.
That's the way we were. We really didn't care, and it may have hurt us in some ways, but it may have been fine. I think the problem is, I mean, and it's like a blessing and a curse. We came up, we were this cult jam band type, this real strong, dedicated fan base of people that really that loved us because we played different shows every night. We stretched out. And we were doing really well with that. And then all of a sudden, we had this huge hit record. And so everything got really, really big. And you had sort of like crossbreed of fans. You had these sort of like, deadhead types. And then all of a sudden, you had these like kids who saw us on MTV. And so for us, we kind of just kept doing what we were doing. But it's hard to know. I think along the way, certain people got a little alienated. Like the teeny boppers might have been like, what is this Shinwon Alley thing? And then like, the jam band guys were like, I don't want to hear Two Princes, so it's like, we've just always kind of done what we do. And, we tried to navigate that whole thing the best we can, at the time. I mean, now it's 30 years later. I think we're honestly in a lot of ways, we're a better band than ever. There's always certain things about you when you're young, and there's a freshness that we had then. But I think that everybody's a better musician. I think we put on a much better live show now. We're professional. We have all this experience under our belt, and it's been a lot of fun recently, especially.
Muddy Brother says, Aaron's tight playing snare sound and ghosts inspire my playing to this day, along with Glenn Graham, but for different reasons. I'd love to hear how Aaron finds playing with Mark White, the jams, etc.
Well, Mark's not currently in the band, in case you didn't know. But I love playing with Mark all these years, and I knew Mark. He was one of the first guys I met in New York City when I first came to town, even before I met the Spin Doctors guys. Like right when I moved to town, I started answering auditions in the back of the Village Voice. That's the way it was back then, drummer wanted. And I got in this funk band called Spade, really great band. And Mark was the bass player. And that's how I met Mark. And then we had a bunch of different bass players before Mark joined. And after going through like 6 or 7 bass players that didn't work, I was like, let's try out Mark, even though he was like totally different kind of guy than us. So I wasn't sure. I was sort of hesitant to ask to bring him on because I was like, this dude is so different. He's like this hardcore like funk bass player from the Bronx, and like me and Eric and Chris are kind of these like hippie dudes, you know. but when Mark joined is when the sound really came together, and you know, yeah. So Mark's great.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier too that Mark brought something, in my opinion, to the like the syncopation, of course, but there's this thing that happens, and it's almost like in a lot of ways when I listen to Prince's is a good example, but like Pocket Full of Kryptonite's another one. That's almost like you, Mark, and Chris are kind of, there's almost like there's these, because Chris's singing style is so percussive. At sometimes you can hear like there's almost three drummers happening here. Like there's a lot of percussiveness in
Definitely.
a lot of songs, and then of course with the way that Eric plays the sort of the really bluesier. I wonder, like, was that something you guys, did that develop because of the live stuff, or were you more aware of that when you started recording this stuff?
It really just developed. I mean, the whole thing really just developed organically. I mean, I can't never remember having a conversation about like, you know, let's try to do this, or you do this, or you do that.
Right.
Just sort of like the styles blended together, and you know, you find a way to make, even if things don't feel right, you make them work. And after, like, you know, like you were saying, we played so many times that things just found their sort of gel. And you're right, everybody in the band does have a good pocket, and it is very percussive. So, you know, I think we always really, I mean, we did talk about, like, we were aware of, like, because we all love funk, we were aware of like having a really strong groove. And we used to do this thing where we'd play like the same groove over and over and over. Like Chris would just sort of do this rap or do a sing along, and me and Mark and Eric would just play the exact same thing for like 20 minutes. Like in the like we used to play clubs, you know, and we would play like 3-4 sets a night, like in the early days.
Sure.
Sometimes like this third or fourth set, we just get into crazy jams, and that's one of the things that we did talk about a lot, was like just playing the same part, the same thing, over and over and over, and letting Chris just sort of do his thing on top of it. And so we were very, you know, we've always been real groove conscious, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's very evident.
All right. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is a bit. I've always been curious about this, and this is a bit of a detour. The album cover art. Is there anything significant about that? It's a phone booth, and a trash can.
Yeah, I mean,
was there something significant about it, or just was a cool picture?
Just the Jimmy Olsen reference, the telephone booth, Superman.
Yep.
Kryptonite. Yeah. And it's an old stock photo. I can't remember who found it, but I love the cover. It was just real sort of. As soon as we saw it, we all had a lot to do with the, you know, putting that together. I know Chris had a lot to do with it, and he handwrote all the lyrics and all the liner notes and stuff. They're all handwritten in there. I believe. And I haven't looked at that in so long, but
blow some dust off of it, pull her out.
Yeah.
Put it on the LP. Put it on the old.
You're like, you guys had a lot of hands-on with it, like that. You had a lot of decision-making power with the album.
We designed. I remember it was down to the wire, like the night before, like, because me and Chris lived together at the time. We had an apartment on 12th Street and First Avenue, and I remember like down to the wire making changes and putting that all together, and you know. So yeah, everything was very hands-on, you know.
We're going in the right direction here, because I'm very curious about a few things. You mentioned way earlier that the album actually launched right before Nirvana's album.
1 week before.
Yeah, you got it. And so now we've gone through. You're a band. You've done all the recording. You guys are cool guys. You got all the artwork done. Now, what the hell do you do with this thing? Right.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
And I'm not going to press play on this, but I do want to bring this at least onto the screen. But were you on Sesame Street?
Yeah, that was later though. That was like, we were on Sesame Street.
Yeah.
That was like 3 or 4 or 5 years later. Yeah.
It's all part of the marketing, my friend. So what did you? Yeah, exactly, exactly. So what did you, once you got this album done? Kind of what was the What was the marching orders? What do we do with this thing?
Well, we basically hit the road, that was it. And but it was kind of like it just came out like to deaf ears, It's like one day it was not out and the next day it was out and nobody gave a fuck,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's like, except for
Nobody knew it was coming.
We had a friend who ended up joining our crew like a year later. This guy, Sean Giblin. He was like a friend and a fan. I used to tape all our shows, and he managed this great record store on St. Mark's Place. I forgot the name of it, but it was great. And he would play it constantly in there, and it actually went to #1 in his little store. that was about it.
That's awesome.
But
hometown hero. Yeah.
Yeah, but for the most part, it just came out, and that was it. Nothing, because the record company did nothing. I think they put out like 2 Princes to college radio, so but nothing really happened. We'd go and we'd show up at colleges and we'd go play on their little radio station, but it was just dead in the water, And other than us hustling and playing gigs. Like I said, after that first year, it managed to sell about 65,000 copies, but there was like little to no promotion from the record company.
And the moment,
nothing. And it wasn't until that break with that station that.
Well, now the Eye of Sauron is on you, and now you got to actually support this album. Now what happens? Like everybody gets on the phone and goes, "Oh, by the way, we just sold a shit ton of albums. We better do something now. We're a big deal again after a couple of years." What do we do?
The thing is that we were constantly on the road. Even before the record came out, we were touring.
Yeah.
So we were just on the road. So, the only difference was all of a sudden we had a record out. We could tell people to go buy the record if you can find it. Right. It's hard to find. We'd always go to the local music record store, every town. And we'd always see Pearl Jam in the window, a huge display of Pearl Jam. And there'd be like 100 Pearl Jam CDs in the front. And we'd be lucky if we could find one Spin Doctor CD. We'd call the manager, what's going on? Fuck Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
They were on Epic. They were on the same label, so it was obvious that, that all the money was going to Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
So, but then all of a sudden, once they did wake up a year later and release Little Miss, it was the same. The only difference was all of a sudden we started selling records and our shows grew. It was just like we're doing what we always do, but you could feel it. It's like, well, all of a sudden we're on the radio, and all of a sudden, oh shit, we're on MTV. We're making a video, and it's on MTV, and then things just blew up. It went very quickly. As soon as we got on MTV, we did SNL, late that year, and everything from there was just like, it all changed.
You could feel that, though, is what you're saying. You could feel the audience growing.
Well, yeah. All of a sudden, you go from playing like clubs to we were playing theaters and colleges, and before you knew it, I remember then we went over to Europe. Things were Little Miss was a hit. Little Miss had done really well, and I think the record was platinum at this point, maybe gold.
Yeah.
And we made the video for 2 Princes. They put out 2 Princes. We went over to Europe for like 2 months, and we're just starting to break over in Europe. Everything's always a little behind over there, so we're still playing clubs. We're selling out like theaters in the States. We go over to Europe. We're back to playing small clubs, which was really fun for us. And people know about us, but it's just starting to break there. Meanwhile, back home, 2 Princes is like massive, So like we were going, we were watching MTV from Europe over here. 2 Princes was like, I think it became #1 on MTV, and so like when we left, when we came back to the States 6 weeks later, it was like a whole different thing. Then it was
royalty.
Then it was like you're getting followed around in a mall kind of thing,
Wow. So perfect. So now how are you adapting to that? Are you doing the David Lettermans? Are you doing the talk shows? Are you doing now you're obligated to start doing these circuits a little bit more, which is falling out of your area of comfort that you kind of were doing before.
We had already done that because 2 Princes was about 6 months into it. So we'd already done Leno. I'm sorry, we'd done Letterman. We did SNL. But this is still before 2 Princes came out. We did SNL, and it was big, but it was really. When we went over to Europe and then we came back, it was like things really. We came back and it was like one of the hottest bands in the land, for a minute there. It's pretty wild.
Paying bills, no problem at all at that point, right?
That was nice. Yeah.
I said I wasn't going to make this joke, but I'm going to. It's 4:30.
It's not late.
It's actually it's 1:30 where you are. It's 4:30.
It is, but I was very cognizant of your time.
Try to ruin the. It is 4:30 here.
It is 4:30. Is that late or is that early?
You know how that song was written, right?
No, go for it.
Please tell us.
Yeah.
So we're playing. So
ironically, it's 4:30 right now. Go.
There you go. But it was 4:30 a.m. when that song was written, by the way. So we're doing a gig. One of the first gig we ever played was at a fraternity house called the Delta Phi in Columbia University, and everybody was tripping on acid pretty much. So we played this place, not the band though, but we played this place again a few months later. Now this time the band was tripping, but on mushrooms. And
as you do.
And we were playing. It was late, and Chris said, anybody know what time it is out there? What time is it? And this guy, a great friend of ours, an artist named Darren Green, he's definitely credited on that record because he was like our artist, and he's the guy that actually did the.
I see it. Equipment manager as well.
Famous, yeah. He drew the famous black cat for Blues Traveler, their logo. That's Darren Green.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was a good buddy, and Chris said, "What time is it?" And Darren was like, "It's 4:30." And so we just go into this funk jam, and Chris comes up with that lyric. What time is it? No, it's not late. It's early. And of course, the song developed from there. But that was the birth of that song. 4:30 a.m.
Wow.
Uptown New York City.
Yeah.
On mushrooms.
That's amazing.
Nice. So then, is there? So on the back of that, is there an actual Little Miss that exists that she doesn't?
Yeah,
is she aware the song was written about her?
Chris wrote that song about his stepmother.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's not what I expected.
You know what? I'm about to let's see here. I need to plug in.
It's always battery every time. I love it.
There we go.
Yeah,
Chris wrote that song. He didn't tell. Well, we knew what it was, but he didn't tell anybody besides the band what it was about for years. And people always thought it was about an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But it was actually about his stepmother.
Am I incorrect or correct in that Little Bitch? Is that more common than not, or has it always been Little Miss?
Little Miss.
Okay, cool.
He says bitch in it, but a whole lot easier since the bitch left town.
Bitch left town, yeah.
And it's funny because that was our first single, and of course Epic wanted to take out bitch.
Of course,
bitch, yeah, right.
But we didn't do it, and the radio played it anyway. See, it wasn't a problem.
I never connected that.
There might have been a few. I think there were a few stations that did a little bleep, but for the most part, everybody played it. It's no big deal.
Yeah, nobody's listening to the lyrics anyways. Only guitarists. People only listening to the guitar parts. Nobody cares. Oh man.
And the drums.
Well, that does go without saying, especially at the time, considering that it was very different than anything else that was out. Who would have been, out of curiosity, the band that you would have been most compared to at the time? Because every band has a B band, and if you don't have a B band, then you're probably the B band. But yeah,
I don't know. I mean, we were different. It's funny because when we were popular, it was like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and it was that whole grunge thing, and we didn't really fit into that.
Yeah, right.
So we didn't get a lot of comparisons to other bands at the time, but we did get comparisons to other bands. Like I remember, we used to get the Steve Miller comparison all the time.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Which I can kind of see. Like think about Little Miss.
Kind of, yeah.
It's that sort of rock and roll, funky, the range of Steve's voice. I mean, that actually makes sense to me. We would also get compared. We would also get compared to the Grateful Dead all the time, which really it doesn't make a lot of sense if you really listen to us. But it was sort of like because of the jam band thing, and because we jammed, and it's sort of our work ethic. Like bands like us and Blues Traveler and Fish and Widespread Panic, we all had this sort of same work ethic that the Dead did, which was we were hardcore touring acts, and they played different shows from night to night, and so we definitely got that comparison. But I don't think music. I love the Dead, but I never thought we really sound like them musically,
Sadly, and I'm going to be full disclosure here. When I was younger, I never got to see you live. I listened to the album ad nauseum, but if that's even a compliment, but it is. I wore that cassette out, but I never got to see you live ever.
Well,
And I'd say at the time, especially in Canada, I don't know how often you guys made it up to Canada, but you know, listening to local, I want to say local, like Toronto bands was big as well. You know, so we got to see them certainly a lot more.
What was the Tragically Hip?
Hip for sure, yeah.
They were huge.
I was listening at the time to Our Lady Peace or I Mother Earth at the time heavily. And once again, drummers that were very influential to me. So you were in that circle of people. Dave Matthews for sure, right? So
you know, Eric, our guitar player, is from Toronto.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
And he lives there now. He grew up there, and then he moved to New York, and he's back there. But you know, yeah. Hopefully, you'll see us, man. Hopefully, we'll come out your way sometime soon.
Yeah.
But we've had some great gigs in Canada. I mean, one of the best gigs I remember ever having was in Toronto. Actually, it was like one of the loudest crowds, like most appreciative crowds of all time, was in Toronto at the whatever the amphitheater there is. I just remember it was like, just like bizarre, like just.
We're loud.
You guys are loud.
Well, I'm originally from London, which is just outside Toronto.
Yeah. London.
And so it gave me opportunity growing up to at least see shows in Toronto, Niagara Falls. I could go to New York or Chicago. Like there was opportunity to do that in that little hub. It's way harder out here in Vancouver, sadly. Is that the only real opportunity if you're not going to come across the border? I'm going to threaten you right now. If you're not going to come over to Vancouver, it means we got to go down to Seattle to see.
Well, we're playing Alaska in a month. You could go there.
What? It's a bit of a drive.
It's on the right side, right?
Wow. Well, nothing wrong with that. The audience would love you.
Hopefully we'll get to Vancouver. I love Vancouver. It's a great town.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just moved away from there, sadly. I'm only about 4 hours north, but no big deal. I'll make my way.
Nobody's coming to Kelowna, Paul.
That's probably about as close as we'll get, I would think. Right?
That sounds about right. Exactly. Well, do you want to wind her down here,
yeah,
Sean?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is great, man.
Yeah. I could have Aaron forever, but I realize he's got a life and other things to do. So
I got to start preparing dinner now.
Well,
there you go.
So apparently 4:30 is late.
Late, yeah.
I guess it is. Oh well. Aaron, I really, really appreciate chatting with you today.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
Thanks for having me. This is a nice format talking about a record in its entirety. I mean, I do a lot of these, and of course, we always end up talking about this record. But this was pretty cool. I don't know that I've ever done a show where we just focused on one album. So that's really you should do more of these. That's a cool thing.
We're gonna keep her going.
Keep it going. I think people like myself, drummers, would really enjoy talking about that. We don't get to talk about that very often,
There are iconic times in people's lives that maybe a lot of people take for granted. That the albums that were very influential on people were just times in your life that you happen to be recording. And to put it bluntly, you didn't know at the time how influential Two Princes were going to be. You were just a guy playing drums in the studio, and then it caused a thing. And I think that's important for us to recognize in our lives, that the small things that we do could surprisingly impact people a lot bigger than we think in the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's why you got to be, that's what I was saying. Like, you always got to be, even though I didn't feel a lot of pressure then, because, it's not like I said, it wasn't like the red carpet was rolled out, but we were in a very nice, fancy studio. But, it's all about like realizing what you just said and really being prepared and putting everything you have into everything you do, regardless of what it is, anytime, who you're working with, put everything into it, because you just never know,
Yeah.
You always want to do your best, right? You always want to contribute. And,
you're right.
And again, it doesn't matter if something gets, we always hope something gets heard, but the main thing is creating it and doing the best job you can.
Well done. Yeah. There's a segment we have in the show where I say, I'm not a Beatles fan, but, and sadly true, I'm not a Beatles fan, but same deal. They didn't know they were going to become one of the biggest bands in the world. They were just four guys writing some tunes,
Did you see that documentary?
Yes, I watched it and I became a bit of a fan. Yes.
How could not? I mean, it's like Paul comes in. I got a little song today, The Long and Winding Road. No big deal,
Right.
It's like that's the way it was too. It's just like, hey guys, I mean,
yep. Sean has heard me talk about this a lot, is that I really love humanizing people, taking people off a pedestal, that we're so used to it. We're so used to putting people on a pedestal. And I didn't appreciate the Beatles until I saw that documentary where I got to see them just sitting, talking, and just being normal humans doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I learn, and I don't want to use the word respect, but I understand people more when they're less on that pedestal. So whether you think you are or not, you're on a bit of pedestal with me, and now you're just a normal fucking human to me. You're just a normal guy now. Sorry.
I ruined it for you.
You ruined it all. You're just a normal guy.
But, like with the Beatles, I mean, it's like, that they would have never been able to do what they did if they knew what they were doing. You know what I mean? I mean,
true.
I mean, obviously by then they were aware of it, but like still, you can see that they were humble and they were like just a bunch of friends, and they didn't really realize what the history was going to be. They probably thought nobody would care about them in a couple of years. Nobody realizes. They're going to 50 years later. It's going to be this incredibly iconic, historic thing that they did. So I mean, and
with that comes a lot of responsibility as well, though, right? So if you're going to put yourself in that position of being creators, then you got to understand that your creation is going to impact people in different ways, right?
Well, I think what I really appreciated about that show was as much as I know that people considered it somewhat boring, and what I thought right away, I was, especially because my wife and I have been doing an album for the past year and a bit, and over COVID and having a son, there was a little bit more difficulty involved, but it really just, what he did, in my opinion, was show that how absolutely boring it can be at times when you're kind of stuck at this spot. And it's like, I kind of don't know where to go with this. It's like you just sort of have to keep being until something happens, and you'll know it because it'll happen. Like, and like you were saying, Aaron, where you came up with that part and that's, again, this just solidifies my belief back in the day. And like, I graduated in 91 and went on the road like 3 days later. And anytime we listened to the Spin Doctors, it was like, you could just tell, like, this band was fucking, not only were they good players, but they're probably really fucking awesome human beings too, because it comes through in the music, and it's so organic. And that's such a good word to use for this album, is it's so organic. It's as truthful as the playing is, but it was great to hear that some of these things that you came up with, I'm like, yep, that's exactly how they would have done it. Because it's just, there was nothing contrived about this album, which is so refreshing.
The best music is like that. I think you can't underestimate, the music listener. It's like you can't pull the people's eye. I think anytime you try to do something to succeed, sell records or make money, you can hear that. It's not going to be. It's not going to be honest. Not that it doesn't work sometimes, but for the most part, like, the best stuff is honest stuff. When people aren't trying, they're not trying to make money. They're just honestly trying to make good music, and I think you can't underestimate a listener, and people do,
Yeah.
I love it. Well, let's end her there.
All right.
Sean,
hey guys,
thank you so much, buddy. It's great to get to know you, and I'm looking forward to following all your, you're in the middle of a session, or you just finished a session yesterday.
And we just did a new, a really, really good new Spin Doctors record. So keep an eye out for that for next year.
Awesome. Love it.
Man.
Looking forward to it. And I'm not going to let myself down. I'm going to see you soon. Okay.
I hope so. All right, guys. Great to see you, man.
Thanks, Aaron. We appreciate your time. Thanks, bud.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Bye. There you go.
Awesome.
Dude.
Bucket list moment.
Oh man. Yeah. That's really, that's fun.
Yeah. And it's really cool because, to me, like I said, like, that legitimately, like, that album came out when I started playing in bars. Like, that was especially the guys I was playing with, we all were of the same mindset. It was like, whoa, what is that?
Correct. Yeah.
And it was just like we had heard, I think we originally heard Prince's, but it was like, then you started hearing other things. And you're like, wait a second. No, these guys are some serious cats.
That's right. As drummers, I think we can understand that when the drums are clear, Well, and I'm glad we talked a bit about the production and how he physically hits the drums. We're drum geeks here. We want to know what the best approach is. But the learning that hitting hard was not the approach of his. Letting the technology do its thing. You play dynamically the way that you want to play.
Yeah.
And that's how he got his sound.
Exactly. And
so good,
to me, like I said, again, it's, if you haven't done this as a drummer, I highly suggest it, is go and learn Two Princes and learn to play it. Like, put a set of headphones on and try and capture, like, the part of it too is that he, like he said, the gates would kill the song.
Yes.
And there's a flow between the doom doom pa doom 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 pa and the ghost notes on the snare. It's so fucking hard to play and play well and play in time. And the tendency, and I heard what he was saying, is the tendency is to rush that song.
Yes.
And the moment you start to rush it is the moment it starts to suck.
Yep, absolutely.
It can't be done. It can't
Pull
be
it
done.
back
It's
and
gotta
pocket.
be. It's so, when you sit and listen to how slow it actually is, it's like, holy shit, I actually have to fucking know how to play drums to play this song. It just kicks your ass.
The fact that he was trained by Bernard for a year is very, very obvious. I'd never connected those dots.
I never did either.
Great.
And now it just makes so much more sense.
I urge everybody to go listen to Hard to Exist, one of my favorite tracks. And the Bernard, or the Purdy shuffle, is very much there. I can hear that now very clearly. Yeah. It's well done.
Oh, it's crazy. I never understood why or how Aaron developed so much control over his playing. He's so fluid. It's like, it's effortless. And I know that it's not effortless. He put a lot of effort into it, but it has become his, like if you speak
signature.
French and English, he's totally speaking the language of drum in a way that a lot of drummers don't. And now when I listen, now that I know the comparison and how he's studied with Bernard, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, this is the part where we wind her down. This is it.
This is the wind down.
Oh my God.
Aaron's gone. Nobody wants to listen to us talk.
So. Nobody cares about us. If there's anybody in chat right now, say hello. See what's up. And tell us that my beard is out of control. I didn't put any. I put a little bit of oil at the last second in, but nice. I didn't put any other stuff in it to keep it straight. So it's a little out of control.
Yeah, my beard is. No, I've never had it. I've had a beard once. Someone said I looked like an Ewok, so I shaved it the next day.
Yikers! Well, it just takes time. Time, my friend.
Mine doesn't go down, and I'm sure it's a grooming thing, but it would go like.
What does that mean?
To the side.
It's going wide? In what way?
It like I looked like an Ewok.
Like with me, I actually trim it like here, like shallow here, and then let it come out. So I'm actually like trimming the sides so that it goes straight down.
Yeah, I've got one picture of it, and I met Dennis Chambers that night, and my picture with Dennis is with me with a beard.
Wow.
Yeah,
you with a beard, as opposed to you looking so cherub-like right now.
Cherub is a good word. Yes.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Okay. Did you know I baked bread last night in the toaster oven?
Tell me more.
I had at 2:00 in the morning. My son was still up.
Yeah. And
we were watching Alone on Prime, and I heard this weird noise that sounded like my washer when it's emptying, and I'm like, the washer's not on. And so then I walk into the laundry room, and it's like, no, okay, that's weird. And then I turn around to go, and the laundry room is off of the kitchen, and there's a bright light in my oven. I'm like, what the hell? So I open the oven, and the oven element was gone. And I had actually planned to have some bread ready for the morning. I was going to bake it, and it had risen and it was ready to go. And I was like, now my oven is pooched.
The old surprise bread skis.
Yikes. So I was like, well, I've got a toaster oven that says it goes to 350. So I toasted the bread in a toaster oven.
Oh man. And it tastes like good? You're good?
It tastes fine. Yeah. It took like an hour, but yeah, it worked.
But you had to damage control. You had to do it really quickly in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And so now I've got to go change the element in the oven. We were supposed to have pizza night tonight.
Yeah.
So
pizza night is on delay. Or no?
Well, I have to go get the element and change it. Apparently it's very easy.
Well, it's not 4:30. It's well before 4:30.
It's well before 4:30.
It's early right now. I'm reminded that it's only like 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Sean, I loved hanging out with you today. I loved hanging out with Aaron today.
It was fun.
Another one in the can. We did a good job today.
Man.
We did a good job today, in case you're wondering. Terrible.
Pat on the back.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. If you've got a MySpace, I'm sure that we're on. Are we on MySpace, Sean?
No.
Oh, we should have a MySpace channel.
That'd be fun.
I'm sure Justin Timberlake wants us to have that. Because he owns it, by the way. That's it. I got nothing else.
Yeah. I'll
You're
bring
good?
up the end slate and we'll say goodbye.
That sounds good to me. Cheers, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.